Hello and thank you for joining us. I'm Cody Proctor. This is the KREM 2 News Week in Review, where each weekend we bring you headlines from the past week in the Inland Northwest. Let's get started with one of the biggest news stories of the past few days.
That's a little high.
For owner of jumping jackalope axe-throwing Miguel Tamburini, target practice using axes, knives, and in some cases, ninja stars is second nature. He's run the business in Spokane for the past several years.
I usually start the axe throwing experience explaining people that, we're just going to guide the hatchet towards the target.
But lately, his focus has become less on his business and more on what's going on in his home country of Venezuela. He says his mother, who still lives there, called him late over the weekend as bombs began hitting the country just blocks away from her home.
And when everything started happening, I got a couple of messages. We called, we talked to during 30 seconds, and then we lost the connection. And then I was very worried there for a couple of hours.
The bombing came as a U.S. military operation captured Venezuela's president, Nicolas Maduro, and his wife. This week, they were arraigned in New York for crimes involving narcotics and weapons trafficking over several decades. Maduro pleaded not guilty and called the actions against him a kidnapping. Tamburini says he supports the accountability, but is sad the United States had to intervene to get it done.
Something had to happen. Right. My worry is what's going to happen next.
While Tamburini doesn't live there now, he says his connections to his home country since Maduro took to power exposed him to governing issues he knew had to change.
Instead of people being united towards the same goal, people were just fighting, and they were fighting against each other.
Instead of fighting, Tamburini says he hopes a positive change in government and leadership will come about as a result of this, and his loved ones won't have to live through more U.S. operations happening too close for comfort.
Right now, the best case scenario is to find a transitional government, to start unifying people.
Connor McAvoy, KREM 2 News.
Well, KREM 2 News obtained court documents from Thurston County Superior Court showing 11 property owners are involved. The documents allege the state stripped property rights without providing compensation, resulting in hundreds of thousands of dollars in losses.
You have to pay the person you took the property from for the betterment of the public good.
Court documents show the moratorium prevented or delayed eviction even when tenants failed to pay rent, which the property owners alleged this created financial hardship for them, and they were unable to use, possess, or profit from their property for over a year. Now, I talked to Sean Flynn, the president of the Rental Housing Association of Washington, also known as RHA. He says all 11 property owners in the suit are members of RHA.
So my members are mom and pops. My guys own a single family home, or they own a duplex, or they're the accidental housing provider who's renting out grandma's house to make the assisted living payment.
The property owners say they seek compensation from the state and from multiple cities in Washington, including the city of Spokane.
And this is an important distinction, is that the lawsuit isn't claiming that the government doesn't have the power to do it. What the lawsuit is saying is that if you do it, you have to pay me.
Looking back in 2020, Washington State's eviction moratorium put a stop to most evictions as millions of people across the country lost their jobs or were temporarily laid off at the start of the COVID-19 pandemic. In the second quarter of 2020, the Washington State Employment Security Department reported over 342,000 job losses. As of December 2025, this class action lawsuit demands for jury trial.
My members housed a lot of people for free that we never got paid for. And that's not okay.
Now, the property owners are being represented by Davis Wright Tremaine, a law firm based in Seattle. The city of Spokane has told us they received the lawsuit and their legal team is currently reviewing it. For now, I'm reporting in the newsroom. Regan Gallo, KREM 2 News.
I'm told 6 different positions here at KSPS PBS were terminated as a result of these cuts. Management says they're currently going over options to get extra funds without asking viewers to donate.
It's the original studio. It was originally all we had for public television back in the 60s and 70s.
Interim General Manager for KSPS PBS Skylar Reap reminisces about a time the Spokane-based public television station had to work with limited resources. And decades later, he says that history's starting to repeat itself.
A future without federal funding is a little bit uncertain, and so it makes, of course, we feel fear and uncertainty.
On Monday, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting voted to dissolve the organization. CPB helped fund PBS stations like KSPS, as well as NPR and 1,500 local television and radio stations nationwide for more than 60 years. The ending comes as Congress and President Donald Trump decided to roll back federal funding last year. That's $1.1 billion of federal dollars taken away that were already approved over the next 2 fiscal years. In the case of KSPS, REAP says $1.2 million, or 18% of the station's overall budget, are being taken away.
We try to make the tough decisions fairly and abruptly so that staff isn't waiting to see when the next shoe is going to drop.
Those decisions include terminating 6 staff members out of the 30 that work for the station, cutting compensation for another 6 staff members, and eliminating several after-school programs and educational camps for kids. REAP says the remaining 80% of their budget is funded through donations. He adds many longtime viewers and supporters have stepped up and donated more since news of the cuts were first announced in 2025. However,
I don't know how dependable that is as a long-term strategy, right? We need to be looking at new ways of earning revenue and bringing in revenue. So, I mean, all options are on the table.
As REAP and others with KSPS go to the drawing board to figure out how to fill the gap, he emphasizes the station isn't going anywhere, and their longtime supporters can still enjoy their programming, even if resources are limited.
We were a growing organization, and we still are. We're just starting from a step back.
Connor McAvoy, KREM 2 News.
As we go to break, here's a check of your forecast. Welcome back to the KREM 2 News Week in Review. It has been a busy week all across the inland Northwest, so let's catch you up on some of the news you might have missed. There's actually some good news for the East Adams Rural Health Care. According to the hospital's Chief Operations Officer, Dallas Killian, they're no longer at risk of immediately closing this Wednesday. That means an estimated 100 employees won't lose their jobs this week. But their worries aren't over. So why is this Wednesday important? It's because January 7th was the date listed in this WARN notice. The hospital sent that to the state back in November, warning about the possible layoffs and closure. At the time, interim CEO Todd Nida told me the issue stemmed from them having more than $13 million in losses between 2022 and 2024 when there were no audits done, thanks to past mismanagement at the hospital. Since the notice came out, hospital leaders say they did well financially over the past 2 months, enough so that they're no longer immediately at risk of closing. Since then, they've held a public forum and started to work to transition to a rural emergency hospital model. If that happens, administrators say they would still be able to offer outpatient services, but would no longer have inpatient or swing bed stays. If they manage to change their model, they would actually be the first hospital in the state to do so. But there's still a lot of groundwork to cover before that can even happen. That's because the model's been adopted on the federal level, but not on the state level yet here in Washington. In addition, Killian says they're still not in the clear yet financially when it comes to their debt. In the newsroom, Cody Proctor, KREM 2 News.
Right now, the Spokane Regional Health District says they are seeing a significant increase in emergency department visits in the area due to respiratory and flu diagnosis.
Recently, 14.6% of people in the emergency department tested positive for a respiratory illness like the flu.
Started to see a little bit of activity in terms of hospitalization.
Spokane Regional Health District starts to alert when the positivity rate reaches 13.4%. SRHD says they expect that number to reach 20% at the peak of flu season. Mark Springer with SRHD notes even if you already had the flu, you can still be vulnerable to other strains. So taking as much precaution is encouraged.
So we're at the stage where people can make a difference, in terms of, preventing flu from entering their households or reducing the risk of catching flu. We want people to really look at the things that they can control, in terms of their health and their family's health.
Now, multi-care health providers urge patients not to wait. Seek care as soon as symptoms appear.
Headache, fever, achy body, coughing, runny nose, really feeling run down.
They say early diagnosis can shorten the duration of illness, and providers also note they have required masks for employees since January 2nd due to a spike in cases.
Makes a huge difference for us in being able to keep staff. There aren't enough nurses, there aren't enough medical assistants, there aren't enough doctors. If everybody's getting sick, it impacts us as well. And so this is a way for us to keep ourselves healthy so we can keep caring for our patients.
In Idaho, the Panhandle Health District says they are seeing a similar trend with a baseline positivity rate of 2.1%. Right now, that rate is 12%. I'm reporting in Spokane, Regan Gallo, KREM 2 News.
Thanks for joining KREM 2 News this weekend. I'm Cody Proctor. Right now, we're taking a look back at some of the news stories from the past week in this edition of the KREM 2 News Week in Review.
In recent years, Spokane has seen tension between the community and the Spokane County Prosecutor's Office relating to police shootings. Today, here at the downtown Spokane Library, families affected by police violence announced their support for legislation that would create a statewide independent prosecutor position.
It is my son. It is our loved one.
This is the moment 6 years ago David Novak's family learned the Spokane County prosecutor would not be filing criminal charges against the Spokane police officers who shot and killed him.
11 seconds from when you guys said Spokane police until you shot my brother.
Novak's mother, Debbie, fought for change ever since, and today her mission hasn't changed. She and the coalition hopes new legislation will remove what they consider inherent bias by creating an independent prosecutor position to handle police shooting cases.
The idea is to have a state-level agency do these investigations that involve a death. No more of Spokane County investigating Spokane City.
Elected prosecutor Preston McCollum opposes this proposed legislation. He shared a statement that says, in part, prosecutors and judges are rightfully tasked with the duties and responsibilities of reviewing the matters presented to them and acting impartially based on the facts. Creating a new unaccountable bureaucracy is rarely, if ever, the answer to a problem.
I'd like to think that we have legislators who see this for what it is.
Sheriff John Knowles is concerned about creating this statewide position, one that he doesn't believe will be truly independent if they're appointed by the governor or attorney general's office. He suggests the position would undermine voter control.
Their voice at the ballot box, which means they elect their prosecuting attorney to make these decisions. They elect them to do that. That voice is being taken away. Right? That's a civil right they have, that this is peeling back little by little.
Several coalition members jumped to respond to this. Debbie maintained concern for bias, referencing the findings of a task force made up of law enforcement created by Governor Jay Inslee.
Unanimously, what they came up with in that task force was that it was biased to have a prosecuting attorney deciding if the people that he works with on a regular basis is going to have charges pressed against him.
Similar bills have repeatedly been introduced to the Washington state legislature, but saw no success. Amanda Rowley, KREM 2 News.
And I was thinking that we're going to die. I was thinking that the plane is going to crash.
Passengers recalled oxygen masks falling and a flight crew scrambling to land safely and quickly, despite a gaping hole in the plane.
Just this huge bang happened and like a white cloud went through the plane. It kind of looked like fire extinguisher, like powder almost. And I was immediately like, what is going on?
A so-called door plug had blown out in row 26, prompting an emergency landing.
People could have died. Like it's really scary.
All 171 passengers and crew survived, but instead of lauding him as a hero, the pilot, Captain Brandon Fisher, says Boeing initially blamed him. When passengers filed a class action lawsuit in March of 2024, Boeing denied liability, saying its products were, quote, improperly maintained or misused by persons and or entities other than Boeing. Now, the pilot is suing Boeing, his lawsuit reading, quote, this accusation, despite its lacking any semblance of truth, only heightened the emotional impact and distress experienced by Captain Fisher. The lawsuit adds, it was clear Boeing's words were directed at Captain Fisher in an attempt to paint him as the scapegoat for Boeing's numerous failures. Instead of praising Captain Fisher's bravery, the suit reads, Boeing inexplicably impugned the reputations of the pilots. Fisher's lawsuit asks for at least $10 million in damages. Boeing responded to King 5's request for an interview, writing, quote, we will not comment on pending litigation. Boeing said in June it would continue to implement improvements and that they regret this accident.
There are some times when the legislature chooses to have something begin on the 1st of January.
At least 8 new laws took effect across the Gem State at the start of 2026, a relatively small number compared to what typically goes into effect on July 1st.
I think the default beginning date for most new legislation in Idaho is always 1 July because that's when the state's budget year begins.
Boise State political science professor Stephanie Witt says there isn't always a clear reason why some bills take effect in January while others begin in July.
Possibly the state maybe needed some time to be ready to implement, or they were waiting on something else like the changing of tax law, which would go from January to January.
Starting January 1st, the anti-SLAPP statute goes into effect, meaning the subject of a lawsuit in Idaho now has the chance to ask a judge to dismiss the case immediately if they feel it's frivolous. This is in order to avoid months of court hearings. On the healthcare front, healthcare providers are now required to pay for breast cancer screenings for those who have genetic history of breast cancer. And on the home buying front, anyone in the Gem State who is buying a home as their primary residence can now apply for and receive the state's homeowner tax exemption.
The folks down the street here in the state capitol are really the people that are making decisions that will impact our lives.
Witt says regardless of when a bill takes effect, January, July, or under an emergency clause, it's important for Idaho residents to follow the legislative session, as those decisions can affect them directly.
That a lot that happens in the state capitol affects them a lot more directly than anything Congress does or doesn't do.
Welcome back. Before we wrap up this edition of the KREM 2 News Week in Review, we want to remind you that you can get the latest newscast and weather forecast anytime on KREM 2 Plus. It's free to watch and download for Roku, Amazon Fire, and on Apple TV. Now here's one more story before we go.
Mr. Caden, you ready for the new school?
Well, after a nice and long winter break, students are returning to the classrooms today, and for those kids at Adams Elementary, they're now going to be calling their new classrooms here at Camp Adams. So things are back underway, and of course this temporary campus is a direct result of Together Spokane, the past initiative that voters saw on their ballots last November. In terms of the historic Adams Elementary School, though, that was first built back in 1909. It expanded in 1917, and the temporary site only about 2 miles west of the original campus at the old Jefferson Elementary School. A groundbreaking and construction for the new school is expected to start in February or early March. The old building is expected to be torn down in the next month or so. I got a chance to speak with one of the 5th graders about this new transition into Camp Adams.
It's going to be different, but I'm excited for the benefit on the other students. It's going to be cool for them, and maybe someday I'll come back.
Of course, this is the first of many projects that will start this year because of Together Spokane. A couple of the other projects down the line include a new trade school, an indoor tennis and recreation center, and an expansion at the Merkel Sports Complex. As for that 5th grader I got a chance to speak with, he won't get a chance to enjoy the new Adams Elementary School, but he's excited because he's got a younger brother who will get to see those benefits. For now, reporting here in Spokane, Brandon T. Jones, KREM 2 News.
Thank you for spending part of your weekend with us on the KREM 2 News Week in Review. Be sure to keep it here on KREM 2 for more news and weather updates. I'm Cody Proctor. Thanks for watching.